The Weight of Silence by Heather Gudenkauf. Chapter 26. Deputy Sherif Louis. Once again, I am sitting at Tony's kitchen table, a sweating glass of iced tea in front of me. This time, Agent Fitzgerald is sitting next to me instead of Martin. I worry. When this is over, Martin will never speak to me again. And I fear that Tony won't either. I can tell Tony doesn't know what to make of Fitzgerald. His precise, unemotional questions. She wonders if he is judging her and her mothering. I see her turning over each of his questions, searching for any hidden meaning, any tricks. I suppose because she is so used to Griff's manipulative ways. Finding Tony curled up on her couch, delivering a dead baby girl 4 years ago, I'd hoped that she would wise up and get rid of Griff for good. Granted, I don't know exactly what happened that winter night, just that Ben had come home and found his mother covered in a blanket on the sofa, with Callie sitting by, patting her shoulder. I couldn't get Callie to talk to me. She just looked up at me with her big brown eyes and sat there as the ambulance carried her mother away. I asked Ben where his father was, and he couldn't say for sure, but guessed he was probably at Banks, a bar downtown. I debated just phoning over there and talking to Griff, but decided a face-to-face conversation would be more effective. I asked the neighbor to come over and watch the kids, and I went over to Banks. I saw Griff through a smoky haze, sitting at the bar next to a bunch of his old high school friends. His friends were laughing and talking, reminiscing, I'm sure, about the good old days, about the one thing that group had going for them. Griff was uncharacteristically quiet, slamming back shots, nodding and smiling once in a while at what someone said. I walked over to him, and he glanced up at me. He didn't look surprised to see me. I felt the eyes of all of the patrons of Banks watching me, watching what would happen next. My history with Tony was no secret in Willow Creek. I waited for Griff's usual sarcastic greeting. "Deputy Sheriff," he'd say in a pompous, wise-ass voice that made it sound like he was addressing a king or a head of the state. But he just looked expectantly up at me, and a hush fell over his cronies next to him. "Go outside for a minute, Griff?" I asked politely. "Got a warrant, Deputy Sheriff?" Roger, his idiot sidekick, asked, laughing hysterically. "You can talk to me here, Louis," Griff said mildly, then downed another shot. "Can I buy you a drink?" "No thanks, I'm on duty," I replied, and for some reason his friends thought that was funny too, and collapsed in laughter. I leaned in close to him. "It's about Tony, Griff," I said in a low voice, not wanting these jokers to hear. Griff stood up. I'm a good 4 inches taller than Griff, but he's broad and built like a weightlifter. I had no doubt that he could beat the shit out of me, just like he did when I was 19 and had come from college to try to get Tony to come back to me. I had gone to her house, where she still lived with her dad, who seemed to have aged decades since Tony's mother died. I took one look at Tony's face that night and knew something was irreparably broken between the two of us. We could never go back to the way it was. At that time, I didn't want to stay in Willow Creek, and Tony didn't want to leave. My mom had remarried earlier that year and moved back to Chicago with my brother and sister. I loved college, loved Iowa City, and wanted Tony to come back with me. There wasn't really anything left for her in Willow Creek, I thought, but she said no, with regret, I think. She said she was seeing Griff Clark and was doing just fine, that she couldn't leave her father alone. He'd lost too much already. Then she crossed her arms over her chest like she always did when she made a decision and it was final. I leaned in to kiss her goodbye, but she dropped her chin at the last second and my lips landed on her nose. Griff waited until I had driven away. He waited until I had driven 40 miles and stopped for gas. He waited until I was just about ready to get back in my car after paying the clerk, and then he came out from the shadows and sucker punched me in the stomach, and while I was bent over, he kicked me in the balls. "Stay away from Tony, asshole," he hissed at me. I could smell the alcohol on his breath. "We're getting married," he slurred before one boulder-like fist crunched into my face. Those 3 words hurt more than the punch. A few months later, I heard through a friend that Tony and Griff had gotten married. And it wasn't all that many months later when I heard about Ben. It didn't take a genius to do the math. I should have tried harder. I shouldn't have let her go. "Let's go," Griff said, the yeasty smell of beer that emanated from him bringing me back to Banks, and I followed him out of the bar. The cold, brisk air of the parking lot was welcoming after the stale nicotine cloud we just left. "What's up?" he asked innocently. "Is Tony okay?" "She's at Mercy Hospital," was all I said. Even as much as I hated the guy, I couldn't tell him that his baby had died. "What happened? What did she say?" Griff asked. "Not sure," I replied. "She's not saying much right now. Ben called for help." I left out that Ben called me at home, knowing that this could cause him grief later. Griff paused at his truck, keys in hand, and turned on me. "Probably not a good idea for me to drive, huh?" "Probably not," I agreed. We looked at each other for a moment. "Come on," I said finally. "I'll drive you over." We climbed in and I started the cruiser. The only sound was the heater trying ineffectively to warm the car. After driving for a few moments, Griff cleared his throat. "What did Callie say?" he asked, not looking at me. "What do you think she said?" I asked, knowing full well Callie hadn't uttered a sound. Not since I got there, anyway. He cleared his throat again. "Tony fell, but she was fine. She got right back up. She said she was okay. She settled herself on the couch. She was fine when I left." "She's not fine now," I said, pulling into the parking lot of the hospital. When I stopped the car, I turned to Griff and said, "Griff, if I find out that you did anything to hurt Tony, I will come after you. I will come after you, arrest you, throw you in a jail cell, and some night, when no one is looking, I will beat the crap out of you." Griff laughed as he opened the car door. "No, you won't, deputy." There was that obnoxious tone. "Nah, you won't. You're the by-the-book kind of guy. But hey, thanks for the ride." He slammed the door and left me, my breath frosty white, curling around my head. And damned if he wasn't right.